The lipstick on Nathan's collar wasn't mine. I stared at the incriminating smear of red, my heart pounding in my chest. How many times had I washed his shirts without noticing? This time, though, the evidence was unmistakable. I heard the front door open, and Nathan's voice called out, "Sophie, I'm home." Quickly, I shoved the shirt back into the laundry basket and plastered on a smile. "In here, honey?" I called back, my voice steadier than I felt. Nathan appeared in the doorway of our bedroom, his tie loosened and a weary smile on his face. "Long day at the bank," he said, leaning in to kiss me. I turned my cheek at the last second, and his lips grazed my skin instead of meeting my mouth. "Everything okay?" he asked, frowning slightly. I nodded, perhaps a bit too enthusiastically. "Just tired. How about I start dinner while you freshen up?" As I busied myself in the kitchen, my mind raced. Who was she? How long had this been going on? The questions swirled in my head like a tornado, threatening to sweep away everything I thought I knew about our marriage. The sound of Nathan's phone buzzing on the counter snapped me back to reality. I glanced at the screen, seeing a message preview from someone named Olivia. My stomach clenched. "Hey, Soph," Nathan called from upstairs. "Have you seen my blue shirt? The one I usually wear on Thursdays?" I froze, my hand hovering over the phone. I think it's in the wash." I managed to reply, my voice only slightly strained. "Damn," he muttered, coming down the stairs. "I wanted to wear it tomorrow for the big presentation." As he entered the kitchen, I quickly turned back to the stove, stirring a pot of pasta sauce with unnecessary vigor. "I'm sure you have other shirts that look just as nice," I said, trying to keep my tone light. Nathan came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. I stiffened involuntarily. "You okay, babe?" he asked, his breath warm on my neck. "You seem tense." I turned in his arms, forcing myself to meet his eyes. "Nathan," I began, my voice barely above a whisper, "is there something you want to tell me?" His brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean?" Just then his phone buzzed again. We both glanced at it, and I saw panic flicker across his face as he registered the name on the screen. "Who's Olivia?" I asked, my voice steadier now, fueled by a growing anger. Nathan's arms dropped from my waist, and he took a step back. She's just a colleague," he stammered. "We're working on a project together." I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that surprised even me. A project that requires late-night text messages and lipstick on your collar? The color drained from Nathan's face. "Sophie, I can explain." "Save it," I cut him off, holding up a hand. "I don't want to hear your excuses right now." I turned off the stove and grabbed my purse from the counter. "I'm going to my dad's for a while. Don't wait up." As I walked out the door, leaving Nathan calling after me, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger, hurt, and betrayal. Yes, but also a sense of clarity I hadn't experienced in years. For the first time in our marriage, I held the upper hand. Driving to my father's house, I realized this was just the beginning. Nathan's betrayal had awakened something in me, a determination to reclaim my life and my dignity. As I pulled into my childhood driveway, I made a silent vow. Nathan would regret the day he ever underestimated me. I spent a restless night at my father's house, tossing and turning as my mind raced with questions and plans. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't confront Nathan outright. Not yet. I needed proof, undeniable evidence of his betrayal. "You look like you've been through the ringer, sweetheart," Dad said as I stumbled into the kitchen. He pushed a steaming mug of coffee towards me. "Want to talk about it?" I shook my head, managing a weak smile. "Not yet, Dad, but thanks." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "You know I'm here when you're ready." As I sipped my coffee, a plan began to form. I'd start by tracking Nathan's movements, piecing together the puzzle of his deception. It wouldn't be easy, but I was determined. I returned home later that morning, steeling myself for the confrontation. Nathan was waiting, his face a mask of concern and guilt. "Sophie, I'm so sorry," he began. "It was a mistake. It didn't mean anything." I held up a hand, silencing him. "Save it, Nathan. I need some time to think." His relief was palpable, and it made my blood boil. He thought he was off the hook. Over the next few days, I played the part of the dutiful, forgiving wife, but beneath the surface, I was gathering intel. I installed a tracking app on Nathan's phone while he slept, noting his frequent late nights at the office. I combed through our bank statements, finding suspicious charges at upscale restaurants and hotels. One evening, as Nathan prepared for another work dinner, I decided to follow him. I watched from my car as he met a sleek blonde outside a trendy bistro. Olivia, I presumed. My hands shook as I snapped photos with my phone. As they disappeared inside, I felt a tap on my window. I jumped, turning to see a concerned-looking woman peering in at me. "Are you okay, honey?" she asked. "You look upset." I realized tears were streaming down my face. "I'm fine," I managed, wiping my cheeks. "Just watching my husband with another woman." Her expression softened with understanding. "Oh, sweetie, I've been there. It gets better, I promise." As she walked away, her words echoed in my mind. It would get better, but not the way Nathan expected. The next day, I decided to dig deeper. While Nathan was at work, I searched his home office. In the back of a drawer, I found a burner phone. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the messages, each one a dagger to my heart. "Can't wait to see you tonight, baby. Last night was amazing. When can we do it again? I wish I could wake up next to you every morning." I was so engrossed in reading that I didn't hear the front door open. Suddenly, Nathan was there in the doorway, his face a mix of shock and anger. "What the hell are you doing?" he demanded. I held up the phone, my voice surprisingly steady. "I think I should be asking you that question, Nathan." He lunged for the phone, but I dodged him, backing away. "How long?" I asked. "How long have you been lying to me?" Nathan's face crumpled. "Sophie, please. It's not what you think." "Don't you dare," I shouted, my composure finally cracking. "Don't you dare try to gaslight me, Nathan. I've seen the messages, the hotel charges. I saw you with her last night." His eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed. "You followed me?" he hissed. "What gives you the right?" "What gives me the right?" I laughed bitterly. "I'm your wife, Nathan. Or have you forgotten that in your rush to get into Olivia's bed?" We stood there, the air crackling with tension. In that moment, I saw Nathan clearly for the first time, not as the charming man I'd fallen in love with, but as the selfish, arrogant person he truly was. "This isn't over," I said quietly, pocketing the burner phone. "Not by a long shot." As I walked out of the room, leaving Nathan sputtering behind me, I felt a strange sense of calm. The truth was out, and now the real battle could begin. As I sat in my father's workshop, surrounded by the comforting smell of sawdust and varnish, memories of the past flooded my mind. I remembered the day I first met Nathan, how charming and attentive he'd been. Now, those memories felt tainted, like looking at an old photograph and realizing it had been a lie all along. "You've been awful quiet, Sophie," Dad said, setting down his sander. "Still not ready to talk about what's going on?" I sighed, running my fingers along the grain of a half-finished table. "I've been thinking about when Nathan and I first got together," I admitted. "How different things were then." Dad's face darkened. "That boy never did right by you, if you ask me." "What do you mean?" I asked, surprised by the vehemence in his voice. He hesitated, then said, "Remember that first Thanksgiving he came here? When I was showing him around the shop?" I nodded, the memory suddenly vivid. Nathan had seemed so interested in Dad's work, asking questions and admiring the craftsmanship. "Well," Dad continued, "after you went inside to help your mother, he changed, started making snide comments about quaint little businesses and how I should sell out to some big corporation. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. He said that? Why didn't you ever tell me?" Dad shrugged, his weathered hands fidgeting with a piece of sandpaper. "You seemed happy, and I didn't want to cause trouble, but I never forgot it." As Dad spoke, other memories surfaced. Times when Nathan had made subtle digs at my family's background, always couched in jokes or backhanded compliments. How had I been so blind? "There's more," I said quietly, and found myself pouring out the whole story, the affair, the evidence I'd gathered, the confrontation. When I finished, Dad was silent for a long moment. Then he stood, walked over, and enveloped me in a bear hug. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," he murmured. "You deserve so much better." As I cried into his flannel shirt, I felt a new resolve forming. Nathan hadn't just betrayed me. He'd looked down on my family, on the hard-working people who'd raised me. That was unforgivable. Later that evening, I returned home to find Nathan waiting, a bouquet of roses in hand. "Sophie," he began, his voice pleading, "can we talk? I know I messed up, but I love you. We can work this out." I looked at the flowers, remembering all the times he'd used grand gestures to paper over his mistakes. "Put those down, Nathan," I said coldly. "We need to have an honest conversation for once." His face fell, but he set the roses aside. "Okay," he said, sinking onto the couch. "I'm listening." I took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about our relationship, about who you really are. And I realized something. You've never respected me or my family, have you?" Nathan's brow furrowed. "What are you talking about? Of course I respect." "Don't lie," I cut him off. "I know what you said to my father that first Thanksgiving. I know about all the little comments, the way you looked down on where I come from. He had the grace to look ashamed, at least. Sophie, that was years ago. I've changed. Have you?" I challenged. "Or have you just gotten better at hiding it? Because the man who could cheat on his wife and lie to her face doesn't seem very changed to me." Nathan stood, his face flushing with anger. "Now wait just a minute. You're not innocent in all this, you know. Always so focused on your family, never really fitting in with my world." His words confirmed everything I'd been thinking. "Your world," I repeated softly. "That's the problem, isn't it? There's your world, and then there's mine, and you've never really wanted to be part of mine." We stood there, the weight of years of unspoken resentments hanging between us. In that moment, I knew our marriage was over, not just because of the affair, but because of the fundamental disconnect that had always existed between us. "I want a divorce, Nathan," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside, "and I'm not going to make it easy for you." His face paled. "Sophie, don't be hasty. Think about what you're saying." But I was done listening. As I turned and walked out of the room, I felt a strange mix of sorrow and liberation. The life I'd thought I wanted was crumbling, but from the ruins, I would build something stronger. Something true to who I really was. The day after I told Nathan I wanted a divorce, his parents called. I stared at the caller ID, my stomach churning. In all our years of marriage, I'd never felt truly accepted by them. Taking a deep breath, I answered, "Sophie, dear." Margaret's saccharine voice dripped through the phone. "We heard you and Nathan are having difficulties. We'd like you both to come for dinner tonight." I almost laughed at the understatement. Difficulties didn't begin to cover it, but I agreed, knowing this confrontation was inevitable. As Nathan and I drove to his parents' sprawling estate, the silence between us was deafening. I gazed out the window, remembering all the times I'd felt small and out of place in their world of country clubs and charity galas. Richard and Margaret were waiting on the front steps, perfect smiles plastered on their faces. Margaret air-kissed my cheeks, her eyes critically scanning my simple dress. "Oh, Sophie," she sighed, "I do wish you'd let me take you shopping sometime." I bit back a retort, following them inside to the formal dining room. As we sat down to a meal that probably cost more than my father made in a week, the tension was palpable. Richard cleared his throat. "Now let's discuss this misunderstanding between you two." "Misunderstanding?" I echoed, incredulous. "Your son cheated on me, repeatedly." Margaret waved a dismissive hand. "Men will be men, dear. The important thing is maintaining appearances." I felt my blood begin to boil. "Appearances? Is that all you care about?" Nathan shifted uncomfortably. "Sophie, please." "No, Nathan," I cut him off. "I want to hear what your parents think is so important about appearances." Richard leaned forward, his voice low and threatening. "Listen here, young lady. We've worked hard to build our family's reputation. We won't have you dragging the Prescott name through the mud with some tawdry divorce." "Tawdry?" I repeated, my voice rising. "Your son is the one sleeping around." Margaret skied. "Really, Sophie, there's no need for such vulgar language. Perhaps if you'd been a bit more accommodating to Nathan's needs, this wouldn't have happened." I stood up so quickly my chair toppled backward. "How dare you?" I hissed. "I have bent over backwards trying to fit into your world to be the perfect wife, and this is what I get." Nathan reached for my arm. "Sit down, Sophie. You're embarrassing yourself." I yanked away from him. "No, Nathan, I'm done being embarrassed. I'm done trying to live up to your family's impossible standards." I turned to his parents, years of pent-up frustration pouring out. "You've never accepted me, never thought I was good enough for your precious son. Well, guess what? He's not good enough for me." Richard's face turned an alarming shade of red. "Now see here." But I was on a roll. "No, you see here. I'm filing for divorce, and I don't give a damn about your reputation. Nathan can have Olivia, and you can have your perfect, classist little world. I'm done." I stormed out, leaving them all sputtering behind me. As I walked down the long driveway, I heard footsteps behind me. It was Nathan. "Sophie, wait," he panted. "You can't just walk away like this." I spun to face him. "Watch me, Nathan. I've spent years trying to be someone I'm not for you and your family. No more." His face hardened. "You'll regret this, Sophie. You've got nothing without me." His words hit me like a slap, but they also ignited something deep inside me. "You're wrong, Nathan," I said quietly. "I've got myself, and that's more than enough." As I walked away, leaving Nathan standing in his parents' driveway, I felt a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. I had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in years, I felt truly free. Back at home, I sat at our kitchen table, my hands shaking as I picked up my phone. It was time to make some calls, to a divorce lawyer, to my father, to the friends I'd neglected over the years. As I dialed the first number, I knew my life was about to change dramatically. But I was ready to reclaim my identity, my dignity, and my future. The fertility clinic waiting room was eerily quiet, filled with couples avoiding eye contact, each lost in their own private hopes and fears. I sat alone, clutching my purse, wondering how I'd ended up here again. "Mrs. Prescott," the nurse called. I flinched at the name, still not used to the idea of shedding it. Dr. Patel greeted me with a sympathetic smile. "Sophie, it's been a while. How are you doing?" I swallowed hard. "I'm going through a divorce, actually." Her eyebrows shot up. "I see. And you're still interested in pursuing fertility treatments?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Was I? The truth was, I didn't know anymore. For years, trying to conceive had consumed me, defined me. Now, everything was different. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "I guess I just needed to know my options." Dr. Patel nodded, her expression kind. "Well, let's review your test results from last time, shall we?" As she pulled up my file on her computer, I found myself thinking about all the times Nathan and I had sat in this office, holding hands, putting on brave faces as we received one disappointing update after another. How much of that had been real, and how much had been just another performance for him? "Sophie?" Dr. Patel's voice snapped me back to the present. "Are you all right?" I realized there were tears streaming down my face. "I'm sorry," I mumbled, reaching for a tissue. "It's just a lot." She reached out, patting my hand. "It's okay. This is an emotional process for everyone, even in the best of circumstances." Taking a deep breath, I asked the question that had been gnawing at me for years. "Dr. Patel, was it me? Was I the reason we couldn't conceive?" Her brow furrowed. "Sophie, fertility issues are complex. It's rarely just one person's fault." She hesitated. "Your tests always came back normal. It was Mr. Guy Prescott who had some challenges." The revelation hit me like a thunderbolt. All this time, Nathan had let me believe it was my fault, had let me feel broken, inadequate. The injustice of it burned in my chest. "He never told me," I whispered. Dr. Patel looked confused. "He assured me he'd discussed it with you." "Sophie, I'm so sorry. I assumed you knew." I stood up abruptly, nearly knocking over my chair. "I have to go. I'm sorry. I can't be here right now." I fled the clinic, gasping for air as soon as I hit the sidewalk. My phone buzzed in my purse, a text from Nathan. "Where are you? We need to talk about the house." Anger surged through me. How dare he act like everything was normal, like he hadn't been lying to me for years about something so fundamental. Before I could stop myself, I was dialing his number. He answered on the second ring. "Sophie? What's going on?" "You bastard," I hissed. "You let me think it was my fault we couldn't have a baby. Wes, do you have any idea what that did to me?" There was a long pause. When Nathan spoke again, his voice was cold. "Who told you?" "It doesn't matter," I snapped. "What matters is that you lied. Again, about something huge." "I was protecting you," he said, but his tone was defensive. "I didn't want you to feel." "Don't you dare try to justify this," I cut him off. "You weren't protecting me. You were protecting your ego." I ended the call, my hands shaking. As I stood there on the sidewalk, passers-by giving me concerned looks, I felt something shift inside me. The last lingering doubt, the tiny part of me that had wondered if I was making a mistake by leaving Nathan, evaporated. My phone buzzed again, another text from Nathan. "We need to talk. Come home." I stared at the message, a strange calm settling over me. Home. That house hadn't felt like home in a long time. Maybe it never really had. With sudden clarity, I knew what I had to do. It was time to stop reacting to Nathan's lies and manipulations, time to take control of my own story. I texted back a single word, no. Then I called my father. Dad, I need your help with something. It's time for me to make a fresh start. As I walked away from the fertility clinic, I felt lighter than I had in years. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it felt full of possibility. I stood in front of the charming 2-story house, my father beaming beside me. The fresh paint gleamed in the sunlight, and flower boxes hung from every window. It was perfect. Well, what do you think? Soph? Dad asked, barely containing his excitement. It's beautiful, Dad, I breathed, but I can't possibly accept. He waved away my protests. Nonsense. I've been saving this lot for years, waiting for the right moment. And with everything you're going through, well, I thought you and Nathan could use a fresh start. My heart clenched at the mention of Nathan's name. Dad didn't know about the divorce yet. I hadn't found the courage to tell him. And now, faced with his incredible generosity, the words stuck in my throat. Let's go inside, Dad said, pulling out a set of keys. Wait till you see the kitchen. As we toured the house, my mind raced. How could I tell him the truth now? How could I break his heart after he'd poured so much love and effort into this gift? My phone buzzed insistently in my pocket. Nathan, again. I'd been dodging his calls since our confrontation about the fertility treatments, but I knew I couldn't avoid him forever. Everything okay? Dad asked, noticing my distraction. I forced a smile. Just work stuff. Don't worry about it. We were in the master bedroom when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Looking out the window, my stomach dropped. Nathan's sleek black car was pulling up. Dad, I said urgently, I need to tell you something. But it was too late. Nathan's voice boomed from downstairs. Hello? Anyone home? Dad's face lit up. Perfect timing. Now we can surprise both of you together. Before I could stop him, he was heading downstairs. I followed, my heart pounding. Nathan stood in the entryway, his eyes widening as he took in the house. When he saw me, his expression hardened. Sophie, finally decided to answer my calls, I see. Dad looked between us, confusion creeping into his features. Is everything all right? Nathan's charm switched on like a light. Of course, sir, just a little miscommunication. What's all this about? As Dad launched into an explanation about the house, I watched Nathan's face. I could see the calculations happening behind his eyes, the dollar signs practically visible. This is incredibly generous, Nathan said smoothly. We can't thank you enough. We need to talk, I hissed, pulling Nathan aside while Dad busied himself in the kitchen. About what? Nathan asked innocently. About how you've been avoiding me? Or about how you're clearly hiding things from your father? I felt my anger rising. Don't you dare try to turn this around on me. You're the one who's been lying for years. Nathan's voice dropped to a menacing whisper. Careful, Sophie. You wouldn't want to make a scene in front of Daddy, would you? Especially after such a generous gift. I recoiled, seeing the true Nathan emerge. Manipulative, cruel, and utterly self-serving. Everything okay in here? Dad called from the kitchen. Fine, we both answered in unison, plastering on fake smiles. As we rejoined my father, Nathan slipped his arm around my waist, playing the part of the devoted husband. I felt sick. So, when can we move in? Nathan asked eagerly. Dad beamed. As soon as you'd like. I've already had the utilities set up in your names. I felt the walls closing in. This house, meant to be a symbol of love and new beginnings, was quickly becoming a trap. Actually, Dad, I started, my voice shaking. There's something I need to tell you. Nathan squeezed my waist painfully. What Sophie means is, we're overwhelmed with gratitude. Aren't we, darling? I looked between my father's hopeful face and Nathan's warning glare. In that moment, I realized the true cost of staying silent, of playing along with Nathan's charade. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about protecting my father, about standing up for the truth. Taking a deep breath, I stepped away from Nathan. No, I said firmly, that's not what I mean at all. Both men stared at me, shock evident on their faces. I squared my shoulders, ready to finally speak my truth, no matter the consequences. Dad, Nathan and I are getting a divorce, and there's a lot more you need to know. The silence that followed my declaration was deafening. Dad's face crumpled in confusion, while Nathan's eyes blazed with fury. What are you talking about, Sophie? Dad asked, his voice trembling. Nathan stepped forward, his charm cranked to maximum. Now, Sophie, let's not be hasty. We're just going through a rough patch. No, I cut him off, my voice stronger than I felt. No more lies, Nathan. Dad deserves to know the truth. I turned to my father, my heart breaking at the hurt in his eyes. Dad, Nathan's been cheating on me, for months, maybe years, with a woman from his office named Olivia. Nathan's facade cracked. You can't prove anything, he snarled. Actually, I can, I replied, pulling out my phone. I have texts, photos, hotel receipts, but that's not even the worst of it. I told them everything about the fertility treatments, about Nathan's lies, about his family's constant belittling. With each revelation, Dad's face grew darker, while Nathan's turned an alarming shade of red. When I finished, Dad stepped between us, his voice low and dangerous. Is this true, Nathan? Nathan's eyes darted between us, calculating. Then, shockingly, he laughed. So what if it is? You really think your precious little girl is so innocent? She's been snooping through my things, following me around like some kind of stalker. And now she's trying to manipulate you with this sob story. I felt like I'd been slapped. How dare you? No, how dare you? Nathan shot back. You think you can just throw away everything we've built over a few harmless indiscretions? Harmless? I echoed, incredulous. You've been lying to me our entire marriage. Nathan's face twisted into a sneer. And what about this house, Sophie? Were you planning on telling your father you want a divorce before or after you accepted his generous gift? Dad held up his hands. Now wait just a minute. But Nathan was on a roll. You know what? I think I deserve this house. After putting up with your family's working-class drama for years, it's the least I'm owed. Something inside me snapped. All the pain, all the humiliation, all the years of trying to be good enough, it all came pouring out. You don't deserve anything, I hissed. Not this house, not me, not one single thing my family has given you. I turned to Dad, tears streaming down my face. I'm so sorry, Dad. I should have told you sooner. I was just ashamed and scared. Dad pulled me into a fierce hug. Oh, sweetheart, you have nothing to be ashamed of. Nathan scoffed. How touching. Well, I hope you're both prepared for a fight, because I'm not walking away from this empty-handed. As if on cue, a car pulled up outside. We all turned to see a sleek convertible, Olivia at the wheel. Nathan's eyes widened in panic. Olivia? She stepped out of the car, confusion evident on her face. You texted me to meet you here. Said you had a surprise. Her eyes darted between us. What's going on? I felt a surge of unexpected pity for her. He's been lying to you too, Olivia. Just like he's been lying to all of us. Nathan's composure finally shattered. You're all insane. I don't have to stand here and listen to this. He stormed towards Olivia's car, but Dad blocked his path. Oh no, you don't. You're not going anywhere until we sort this out. Nathan's face contorted with rage. He shoved my father, hard. Dad stumbled, nearly falling. Before I knew what was happening, I was between them, my hand connecting with Nathan's face in a resounding slap. The shock of it seemed to freeze time. We all stood there, breathing heavily, the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on us. In that moment, I realized this was it, the point of no return. Whatever happened next would change all of our lives forever. I took a deep breath, squaring my shoulders. Nathan? I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. I think it's time we finish this, once and for all. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal meetings, heated arguments, and painful revelations. But as I sat in the courtroom, waiting for the judge to deliver her final verdict on our divorce proceedings, I felt an unexpected calm. Nathan's lawyer had fought tooth and nail, trying to claim half of everything, including the house my father had gifted us. But I had come prepared. The evidence I had gathered of Nathan's infidelity, combined with the testimony of his own parents about his behavior, had painted a damning picture. In the matter of Sophie Adams versus Nathan Prescott, the judge began, her voice echoing in the silent courtroom. I held my breath, feeling my father's reassuring hand on my shoulder. As the judge read out her decision, I watched Nathan's face. With each ruling, the division of assets, the nullification of his claim on my father's gift, the alimony payments he would owe, his arrogant mask crumbled a little more. When it was over, Nathan stormed out without a word, but I felt no satisfaction in his defeat. Instead, I felt free. Outside the courthouse, I was surprised to see Olivia waiting. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "I'm sorry," she said simply. "I didn't know about any of it. The lies, the manipulation. I feel like such a fool." I nodded, understanding all too well. We both were, Olivia, but not anymore. As she walked away, I turned to my father. "Dad, I can't thank you enough for everything you've done." He pulled me into a bear hug. "That's what family is for, sweetheart. Now, what do you say we go home?" Home. The word held new meaning now. Not the cold, pristine house I had shared with Nathan, always feeling like an outsider, but the warm, loving home of my childhood, where I could heal and rediscover myself. Over the next few months, I threw myself into helping with Dad's construction business. The work was hard, but satisfying. With each house we built or renovated, I felt like I was rebuilding a part of myself. One crisp autumn day, as we finished up a project, Dad turned to me with a twinkle in his eye. "You know, Soph, you've got a real knack for this. Ever thought about taking over the business someday?" The idea took root, growing stronger with each passing day. I enrolled in business classes at the local community college, determined to learn everything I could. A year to the day after my divorce was finalized, I stood in front of a mirror, hardly recognizing the woman looking back at me. Gone was the meek, insecure housewife. In her place stood a confident businesswoman, ready to take on the world. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad. "Big meeting today. You've got this, kiddo." I smiled, feeling a surge of gratitude for his unwavering support. As I drove to the meeting, a potential major contract that could take our family business to the next level, I passed by my old neighborhood. There, on the corner, was Nathan. He looked older, tired. For a moment, our eyes met through the car window. I saw a flicker of recognition, then regret, pass over his face. But I felt no anger, no desire for further revenge. Nathan's true punishment was living with the consequences of his actions. My revenge, if you could call it that, was living my best life without him. As I pulled up to the office building for my meeting, I took a deep breath. This was it, the moment I'd been working towards. But more than that, it was a symbol of how far I'd come. I thought back to that day in the new house when I'd finally found the courage to speak my truth. It had been terrifying, but it had also been the first step towards reclaiming my life. Stepping out of the car, I straightened my jacket and lifted my chin. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I was ready to face them. Because now I knew my own strength, and nothing, not Nathan, not his family, not society's expectations, could ever take that away from me again. With a smile on my face and determination in my heart, I walked into the building, ready to write the next chapter of my story on my own terms.